You need a thesis statement. You need a thesis statement.
All right, we've just talked about thesis statements, and we've come up with sports cars are fun, fast, and a good way to meet girls. Okay, well that's a little juvenile as a thesis statement, but structurally it's going to help us understand how essays are laid out, how they are arranged in parts, and hopefully it will make the theory clearer for you. So what I'm going to talk about in this clip is structure. The second aspect of writing between grammar and content is structure. The layout or the arrangement of the ideas of your essay into sentences and paragraph units. Paragraphs were not always a part of Western rhetoric. If you read medieval manuscripts, there's no paragraph division, or sometimes it's haphazard or unpredictable. But the basic idea of a paragraph is to give your brain a break. Paragraphs are very visual in nature. They signal to the reader, you are finished talking about one complete and connected, coherent idea. So it's a visual indicator. You can stop, take your eyes off the page, think about it, move on. That's really all a paragraph does visually, and what the indentation or the line skipping does for you. It signals to the reader, okay, we're going to talk about something new. So making a good paragraph involves cohesion, making sure that all of the sentences in the paragraph have some logical relation to each other. All right, so once we have paragraphs, we're going to arrange them into a concrete whole. And some of you have already dealt with this basic principle, the 5-paragraph essay. What are its parts? The introduction paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. All of those paragraphs serve a different function. The first one we'll talk about is the introduction paragraph, which is obviously going to introduce your subject and give your thesis statement. Your introductory paragraph, again, is going to give you background information, your thesis statement, and hopefully, if you're really good, give some idea of how you're going to discuss the rest of the material in the paper, so that the reader knows exactly what's going to happen and there's no surprises. Again, don't surprise your reader. Now, we have our introduction paragraph, we have our body paragraphs. Our body paragraphs are going to talk about the meat of the paper. To use a nice cooking analogy, your paper is a little bit like a sandwich. The bread on top is the introduction, your conclusion on the bottom, but the meat of the paper is the middle of it, the body. That's where you're going to talk about the arguments and support the arguments that you've made. Okay, when I was a composition teacher in Las Vegas, North Americans have a slightly different attitude to higher education than Asians do, and I'm generalizing, of course. Not everybody is like that, but in general, one of the things that I appreciate about teaching in Korea and Asia is the immense respect for education. That doesn't always apply in the United States, where education is sometimes viewed with misgivings, with some suspicion. In particular, when I taught composition in Las Vegas, a lot of men, a lot of engineers, people in sciences, they had a lot of contempt for writing courses. They felt they were feminine, impractical, or useless. The strange thing is that engineering students, and in particular computing science students, often did very well in writing classes because they understand structure. They understand recursive steps. They understand process. And the structure of an academic essay is very process-oriented and normally very predictable. Introduction with your thesis statement, body paragraphs, and a conclusion which sums up and returns to the main points of the paper or of the thesis statement. Now, we need to explain that there's a difference between a thesis statement and a topic sentence. Thesis statements go inside introductions, and they introduce the basic position of the entire paper. topic sentences begin body paragraphs. They simply state what the subject of that paragraph is going to be about. Okay, again, your topic sentence is simply going to say what that paragraph is about. Now, if we have three paragraphs of body material, each one of those topic sentences is going to link to the thesis statement. So, sports cars are fun, fast, and a good way to attract girls. Well, you can see where this is going. This is very easy. Body paragraph 1. Sports cars are fun because blah, blah, blah. You're going to provide some kind of advice or information or proof or evidence, some kind of support or specifics that's going to support that main idea. So we have fun, fast, attract girls. All of those ideas link back to our thesis statement. Okay, so now we're almost done, but we still have our conclusion. What does our conclusion do? Well, it restates the main ideas of the paper. Now, sometimes lazy writers do this. I've seen students do this. They take their mouse, they copy their thesis statement, and they paste it into their conclusion. Don't do that. Don't do that for two reasons. Don't do that for several reasons. The first reason is that, literally, you are insulting the reader. When I see that, when I see students who have copied and pasted their thesis statement into their conclusion, I look at the paper and I say, how stupid do you think I am? Maybe I was born yesterday, but I spent the afternoon downtown. You're not fooling me. I know what you did. All you did was copy your thesis statement into that box. And that's extremely lazy. The reader knows that you didn't put any effort into this, and you're simply moving one piece of text into another box as a perfunctory gesture in order to fulfill the structural necessities of the paper. In other words, you are being lazy just to get the job done. So don't do that. The second reason you don't want to use the same text twice, partly because it's redundant, but also because the way that you are talking about the subject at the beginning of your paper and at the end of your paper is different. I'm just not that great at writing conclusions. I've never been strong at writing conclusions, and so that's going to affect how I write papers and the relative lengths of the parts of my papers. But it's something I just have to work at. But one thing that's helped me over the years to become a better writer of conclusions is to think of my paper chronologically. What I mean by that is this. At the beginning of the paper, your paper is looking forward. In this paper, I'm going to talk about sports cars. Sports cars are fun, fast, and blah, blah, blah. At that point, I know more about sports cars than you do, because I'm the guy writing the paper. So yes, that's a little bit egotistical, but it's true. I know more about that subject than you do, and I'm trying to convince you that my position is right. At the end of the paper, in theory, you're my equal, and so how I'm going to relate to you is different. Now you know what I know, and now you've heard my arguments for why sports cars are a good thing. So think of it in chronological terms, that at the beginning of the paper, I'm predicting, and at the end of the paper, I'm looking back. As we can see, in conclusion, now we understand that sports cars are a great thing, and every young man should own one. Bad conclusions result when writers have nothing left to say, or BS the reader with poetic fluff that lacks content. Good conclusions restate the thesis statement and the paper's main arguments while looking at them in retrospect. What else can we do to end a conclusion better? One technique is to look to the future. We can see that sports cars continue to gain popularity and will probably become common in other countries, as young men there have the same wishes. Another is to ask a question or challenge the reader. Many people view jury duty as a nuisance. However, juries are part of our identity as a free and just society. All of these possible strategies answer the question, who cares? Why should the reader care whether Hamlet is crazy,
or how World War II ended. Try to make your conclusion relevant to your reader. Sewage treatment may not be an exciting topic, but its failure can lead to epidemics and serious public health consequences.
So all right, we have the basic 5-paragraph unit structure. It's not written in stone. Western rhetoric did not always use this sort of prescribed system, but it's common now, it's the standard, and it works. There's been a sort of shift over the centuries in Western writing towards being more careful about the reader's ability to understand what's happening. Okay, again, to be more specific, when I read early modern essays written in the 1700s, 1600s, there is less of an expectation or less of a sense of responsibility on the part of the writer to make things clear. Over the centuries, there's been a sort of shift, so that now the emphasis is on making things as clear as possible for the reader. And partly that's because writers are dealing with a much more varied audience, and an audience that is tempted to put down the paper and surf the internet. So there may be practical reasons for that shift in rhetorical style. But for whatever reason, our primary goal in having this structure is simply clarity. We want to make things as simple as possible when the reader is trying to follow our arguments. Other than that, this is simply a format that will help you, and if it becomes a situation where you don't need this format anymore and you need to move beyond that, so be it. What happens when we outgrow this 5-paragraph format? If your teacher says, I want you to write a 2 or 3 page paper about X, 5 paragraphs works great. What happens when the teacher says, I want 5 pages or 10 pages? What happens when you're writing an honors thesis of 30 pages, a master's thesis of 100 pages, a doctoral dissertation of 500 pages? You can't obviously have a 5-paragraph paper. Well, here's probably what most writers are going to do. They're going to do one of 2 things. One possibility is that they're going to insert a lot of body paragraphs between that introduction and that conclusion. So if you wrote a 5 or 10 page paper, you might have the introduction paragraph, you'd have the conclusion paragraph, you might have 20 body paragraphs. Those body paragraphs might all break down into subsections of your thesis statement. Now, you can't have a thesis statement that now has 20 elements. Sports cars are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and so on. What you might simply do is your body paragraphs might form chunks. So you might have 5 paragraphs now that are dealing with fast, and 5 paragraphs that are dealing with fun, and so on. You might break those paragraphs into chunks. Another possibility is that you have recursive subsections. What I mean by that is you're writing a 15-page thesis. What you might have is one introduction paragraph that is a master introduction. Then you would have your first section. That first section would have its own sub-introduction paragraph, its own 3 or 4 body paragraphs, and a sub-conclusion paragraph. Then you might have a second section with your second sub-introduction, body paragraphs, conclusion, your third subsection, and then a final master conclusion paragraph, which would tie together all of those sections into one coherent argument. When I wrote my master's thesis, at first it seemed very intimidating, the idea that I would write a 100-page paper. That's not how it turned out, in fact, because one of my professors said, think of this as writing 4 smaller papers with a connected idea. That makes this process much easier on your brain and much easier to plan and organize. Again, computing science students seem to get this because they understand recursive steps. So that might be a better solution for you, Or you might prefer to have one body paragraph, one conclusion, and lots of intervening body paragraphs. It's your choice, it's your style.